At approximately 4:45 in the afternoon on June 17, 2016, three hikers reached a hill in one of the most remote stretches of wilderness in the American West. The plan was simple. Two of them would go up and over. The third would walk around. They would meet on the other side. Two of them made it. The third, a 52-year-old former NASA employee, an experienced backcountry hiker who had been exploring the Grand Canyon for more than 2 decades, a man carrying 2 gallons of water and enough food to last a week, took those steps around that hill and was never seen again. No body, no gear, no tracks that could be confirmed as his. Nothing. 10 years later, there is still nothing. His name was Floyd E. Roberts III, and somewhere in the vast, the silent expanse of the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, the land swallowed him whole. This is his case. Before we go any further, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city in the comments. Floyd Roberts disappeared in one of the most isolated corners of Arizona, a place most Americans have never heard of. But someone watching this right now might know that landscape. Someone watching might have hiked those same trails. And in a case like this, that kind of knowledge could matter. To understand what was lost on that June afternoon, you have to understand who Floyd Roberts was, long before he set foot on the Shivwits Plateau. Floyd Eugene Roberts III was born in 1964. He grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, where as a boy of about 10 years old, he became friends with another kid named Ned Bryant. That friendship, forged in childhood, would endure for more than 4 decades. Floyd would go on to serve as the best man at Ned and Heidi Bryant's wedding. The two weren't just friends. They were the kind of friends who build a life around shared experiences, who show up for each other across decades and distance. Floyd was, by all accounts, a deeply intelligent man. He built a career that reflected it. He lived for a time in Huntsville, Alabama, where he worked for NASA, the kind of job that doesn't go to people who coast through life. His neighbor of more than 5 years, Tom Burnett, would later describe him to reporters as a very, very intelligent man, the kind of person with real survivor-type skills. After his time at NASA, Floyd transitioned into education. He moved to Treasure Island, Florida, a small barrier island community in the Tampa Bay area, and became a teacher at Middleton High School, where he taught computer programming and game design. He took the analytical mind that had served him at NASA and turned it toward shaping the next generation. But there was another side to Floyd Roberts, one that pulled him away from classrooms and computer screens and into some of the most challenging terrain in North America. Floyd was a hiker, a serious one. He and Ned Bryant had first started exploring the Grand Canyon region together in 1992. For 2 decades, Roberts had been Bryant's regular hiking partner in the canyon. The Bryants, Ned and Heidi, were board members of the Grand Canyon Hikers and Backpackers Association, and as an organization for people who don't just visit the canyon, but immerse themselves in it. These were not casual tourists snapping photos from the South Rim overlook. These were people who understood the canyon's backcountry, its rhythms, its dangers, its unforgiving beauty. Floyd had hiked the very area where he would disappear. The group had visited the same stretch of wilderness as recently as 2011, completing the trip without incident. He knew the terrain, he knew the heat, he knew the risks. That familiarity is part of what makes this case so difficult to process. Floyd Roberts was not a novice who wandered into the desert unprepared. He was a man who had been doing this for 24 years. Now that you know who Floyd Roberts was, not just a missing person flyer, but a NASA professional, a teacher, a lifelong friend, a man who spent decades walking into the canyon and walking back out. Does he remind you of someone in your life? Maybe someone who's always planning the next trip, always studying the maps, always ready for the next adventure? Tell me in the comments. Keeping Floyd's name in the conversation is the least we can do. In the spring of 2016, Floyd Roberts, Ned Bryant, and Ned's daughter Madeline Bryant began planning an ambitious backcountry expedition. The destination was the Shivwits Plateau, a vast elevated tableland in the extreme western portion of the Grand Canyon. The plan called for a 9-day hike that would take them across the plateau and exit the canyon through Separation Canyon, a place steeped in its own dark history. It was there, in 1869, that 3 members of John Wesley Powell's legendary Colorado River expedition had abandoned the group, climbed out of the canyon, and were never seen alive again. The planned finish date was June 26th. It is worth pausing to understand what the Shivwits Plateau and the surrounding Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument actually are, because the geography is central to everything that followed. Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument is not the Grand Canyon most people picture. There are no paved roads leading into it. There are no visitor centers, no ranger stations, no gift shops. The monument spans more than 1 million acres of wilderness, nearly the same size as Grand Canyon National Park itself, and sits at the junction of 3 distinct ecological regions: the Colorado Plateau, the Mojave Desert, and the Basin and Range Province. Elevation ranges from roughly 1,200 feet above sea level near Grand Wash Bay to over 8,000 feet at Mount Trumbull. The landscape shifts from Mojave Desert scrub to Ponderosa pine forest. 4 species of rattlesnake live within its boundaries. The terrain is carved by deep canyons, studded with volcanic cinder cones, and broken by massive geologic faults. The Shivwits Plateau itself is bounded on the west by the Grand Wash Cliffs and on the east by the Hurricane Cliffs, towering barriers that have impeded travel through the region for thousands of years. This is the kind of place where, if something goes wrong, help is not coming quickly. Transportation into the search area alone would later take several hours. On Friday, June 17, 2016, the 3 hikers set out. The details of the first hours of the trip are limited. What is known is that by late afternoon, the group had not yet reached their trailhead. They were still navigating the approach when, at approximately 4:45 in the afternoon, they arrived at a hill near a location known as Kelly Tanks. Here, the group made a decision that seemed unremarkable at the time. Ned Bryant and his daughter Madeline chose to go up and over the hill. Floyd chose to contour around it, to walk along the side rather than climb. The plan was straightforward. They would meet on the other side. Ned and Madeline reached the far side of the hill. They waited for Floyd. He didn't come. They waited longer. Then they started to worry. They retraced their steps, walking back the way they had come. They returned to the road. They called out. They searched the immediate area. Floyd Roberts was gone. There was no obvious explanation, no cliff edge he might have stumbled over in plain sight, no river crossing where he might have lost his footing, just a hill, a divergence in paths, and then absence. With no cellular reception in the area, Ned and Madeline had no way to call for help. They made the difficult decision to camp for the night, and the next morning, they began walking toward an area where they could get a signal. It was not until Saturday, June 18th, at approximately 3 in the afternoon, nearly 22 hours after Floyd was last seen, that Ned Bryant was able to report him missing to the National Park Service. The delay was not negligence. It was geography. In the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, the nearest cell signal can be hours away on foot. The remoteness that draws hikers to this landscape is the same remoteness that turns a missing person report into a race against time. And time was already running out. Temperatures in the Grand Canyon on the afternoon Floyd was reported missing were around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. In the days that followed, they would climb past 110 degrees. The National Weather Service issued an excessive heat warning for the region, with temperatures in some canyon areas soaring near 120 degrees. Even for an experienced hiker carrying 2 gallons of water, those numbers changed the equation fast. The National Park Service initiated a search and rescue operation immediately upon receiving the report. Initially, around 15 people were deployed into the field, including search dog teams. The early focus was on the area near Kelly Tanks, where Floyd had last been seen heading east toward Trail Canyon, also known as 214 Mile Canyon, in the direction of the Shanley Spring area and the Colorado River. Investigators also considered the possibility that he may have descended into 209 Mile Canyon. As the scope of the problem became clear, the operation expanded significantly. Eventually, 7 ground search teams were working the area, supported by a National Park Service helicopter and aerial resources from the Mesa Verde Helitack crew. The search drew personnel from multiple agencies: Grand Canyon National Park Search and Rescue, Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, Mojave County, and Coconino County Search and Rescue. A base camp was established near Kelly Tanks, outfitted with shade shelters, water supplies, and other resources to sustain the teams in the punishing heat. The search area ultimately covered more than 10 square miles. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The terrain those teams were working through was dense with thick brush, cut by canyons that drop without warning and scattered with volcanic rock formations that make ground-level navigation disorienting. Just reaching the search area from the nearest staging point took several hours. Communication was a constant challenge. And then there was the heat. The same excessive temperatures that threatened Floyd were now threatening the people looking for him. Multiple searchers had to be airlifted out of the field due to heat stress. The National Weather Service warning hung over the entire operation. The Park Service explicitly warned the public that hiking below the rim during the excessive heat warning was dangerous, advising anyone in the canyon to hike only before 10 in the morning and after 4 in the afternoon, resting near shade and water during the worst hours. There was one potential lead early in the search. Rescuers located a set of footprints, but they were unable to confirm that the tracks belonged to Floyd Roberts. In a landscape where other hikers and wildlife pass through, an unconfirmed set of prints is not enough to anchor a search direction. The footprints led nowhere definitive. After 6 consecutive days of intensive searching, 6 days of teams pushing through extreme heat, rugged canyons, and brush so thick it slowed every step, the operation was scaled back on June 24th. The National Park Service announced that the search would transition to a continuous but limited mode. Rangers and pilots would continue to look for clues when in the area, but the full-scale effort was over. Flyers bearing Floyd's photograph and physical description were posted at various locations along the South Rim and throughout the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument. The description was detailed. A 52-year-old white male, 5 feet 11 inches tall, 170 pounds, with brown and gray hair and brown eyes. He had a 2-inch scar on the upper rear hamstring of one of his legs and a small mole to the right of his right nostril. He was last seen wearing a red long-sleeve shirt, blue denim jeans, his multicolored mesh Nike-free sneakers, and white-rimmed sunglasses with orange lenses. He was carrying a large blue low alpine contour backpack. A man dressed in distinctive clothing, carrying a large, brightly colored pack with enough supplies for days. And not a single confirmed trace of him was found across more than 10 square miles of searching. The case was classified by the Charlie Project as lost/injured missing. The National Park Service listed it on their official cold cases page, where it remains to this day. The NPS Investigative Services branch notes that the search for Roberts is in continuous limited mode. That phrase, continuous limited mode, is the bureaucratic language of a case that has no active leads but has not been closed. You've now seen the same evidence the search teams had. An experienced hiker separated from his group near a hill. No confirmed tracks, no gear recovered, no remains found across 10 square miles. Before I walk you through the theories, what's your read? What do you think happened to Floyd Roberts that afternoon? Drop your theory in the comments before we go further. In the absence of physical evidence, the theories surrounding Floyd Roberts' disappearance are necessarily built on inference, terrain analysis, and an understanding of what the environment itself can do to a person. The first and most commonly discussed theory is heat-related incapacitation. This is the theory that requires the fewest assumptions. Floyd separated from the Bryants at 4:45 in the afternoon. While the worst heat of the day would have been earlier, temperatures were still dangerously high. In desert environments, heat exhaustion can onset rapidly. Confusion, disorientation, loss of coordination. If Floyd became disoriented while contouring around the hill, he may have wandered in the wrong direction. In terrain laced with canyons and thick brush, a disoriented hiker can quickly move into an area that is functionally invisible from the air or from ground search teams. If he collapsed in a canyon, in brush, or in one of the many geological depressions that characterize the Parashant landscape, his body and equipment could remain hidden indefinitely. The monument is vast. Only about 5% of its land has ever been formally surveyed. A person who falls in the wrong place in this landscape may simply never be found. The evidence supporting this theory is circumstantial but significant. The excessive heat warning was real. The terrain is exactly the kind that swallows people. And Floyd, by some accounts, had not been hiking for a few years before this trip. While he was experienced, a multi-year gap in strenuous backcountry activity could have affected his conditioning, particularly in extreme heat. The evidence against it is the timeline. 4:45 in the afternoon, was late enough that the most extreme temperatures would have been subsiding. Floyd had 2 gallons of water, a reasonable supply for the conditions. He had food for a week. He was wearing appropriate clothing, and the separation point was near Kelly Tanks, not deep in a canyon. The question becomes, how fast could heat have incapacitated a prepared, experienced hiker who had just started his trip? That's the most straightforward explanation: the desert itself. But here's what doesn't sit right for me. Floyd was carrying a large, brightly colored blue backpack. He was wearing a red shirt. He had white-rimmed sunglasses with orange lenses. This was not a man who blended into the landscape, and yet, across 10 square miles and 6 days of searching, including aerial support, not a single piece of his gear was spotted. Does that bother you? Tell me which theory you're leaning toward in the comments. The second theory involves a fall. The Shivwits Plateau sits above a network of canyons that drop sharply toward the Colorado River. Trail Canyon, 214-mile Canyon, and 209-mile Canyon are all in the area where Floyd was last seen heading. If he descended into one of these canyons, either intentionally, trying to reach the river, or accidentally, a fall could have been fatal. Canyon walls in this region can be vertical or near vertical, with drops that offer no recovery. A person who falls into a narrow slot or deep drainage in this landscape may come to rest in a position that is invisible from above and inaccessible from ground level. The thick brush that covers much of the area compounds the problem. Even large objects, a bright blue backpack, a red shirt, can disappear beneath desert vegetation and rock overhangs. This theory is supported by the direction Floyd was last seen heading. He was moving toward the canyon system, toward the river. If he was looking for a route down, either to reach the planned camping area along the river, or simply following the terrain, the approach to these canyons is where the danger escalates rapidly. And the third theory is less about what happened to Floyd, and more about why he hasn't been found. Some have speculated that Floyd may have become lost and traveled much farther from the separation point than searchers anticipated. In a landscape as vast and disorienting as Parashant, a person moving with purpose but in the wrong direction could cover significant ground before succumbing to heat, dehydration, or injury. The search area, while large at 10+ square miles, represents a fraction of the surrounding monument. If Floyd moved well outside that perimeter before something happened to him, the search would have been looking in the wrong place entirely. This is the nature of wilderness disappearances in landscapes this size. The search area is always a best guess based on the last known position and estimated travel speed. But a person who is lost does not move in predictable patterns. Panic, confusion, dehydration, all of these alter behavior in ways that make search boundaries unreliable. What all three theories share is a single, unsettling conclusion. The Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument is fully capable of making a person disappear without a trace. It has done it before. The Shivwits Plateau has a human history spanning more than 11,000 years, and throughout that history, the land has been defined by what the National Park Service itself describes as rugged isolation and the lack of natural waters. This is a place where people have been vanishing, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not, for millennia. Floyd Roberts is not the only person to have disappeared in or near the Grand Canyon without explanation. As the NPS Cold Cases page lists multiple unresolved missing persons cases from the park and surrounding monuments, the canyon does not give up its dead easily. This case has been cold for 10 years now, a decade since Floyd Roberts walked around a hill and into silence. But cold doesn't mean forgotten, and it doesn't mean permanent. If you've ever followed a missing persons case that was finally resolved after years, maybe decades, of nothing, tell me about it in the comments. Those cases are proof that answers can come when you least expect them. As of 2026, 10 years after Floyd E. Roberts III was last seen near Kelly Tanks in the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, his case remains unresolved. No remains have been recovered, no equipment has been located, and no confirmed sighting of him, alive or otherwise, has ever been reported after June 17, 2016. The National Park Service maintains the case in continuous limited search mode. Floyd's information appears on the NPS Investigative Services Branch Cold Cases page. His case is documented by the Charlie Project, Texas EquiSearch, and multiple missing persons databases. The search never officially ended. It simply became a matter of vigilance rather than active operations. Rangers and pilots keeping their eyes open in one of the most remote corners of the American landscape. The Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument remains what it has always been, a place of staggering beauty and indifferent danger. Millions of acres of canyons, plateaus, and volcanic formations that predate human history by hundreds of millions of years. A place where the Earth is old enough to make human timelines feel meaningless. And somewhere within it, the story of Floyd Roberts remains unfinished. Floyd Roberts was a man who worked for NASA, who taught young people to code, who maintained a friendship for more than 40 years, who served as best man at his closest friend's wedding. He was a man who loved the canyon enough to keep coming back. He deserved to walk out of it one more time. If you have any information about the disappearance of Floyd E. Roberts III, you are urged to contact the National Park Service Investigative Services Branch at 888-65-30-009 or the NPS dispatch line at 928638780. You do not have to give your name, but please give what you know. The file stays open. The desk stays ready until next time. If this case stayed with you, if Floyd's story matters to you, subscribe to the Unsolved desk and leave this video a like. The algorithm decides who sees these cases next, and every like, every comment, every share puts Floyd Roberts' name in front of someone new, someone who might know something, someone who might have been in that area. Share this video with anyone who hikes the Grand Canyon backcountry. The answer to what happened to Floyd might not be in a case file. It might be in someone's memory.